Good afternoon. Hello, Democrats. Hello, Democrats. All right. How'd you like your first sessions? Okay, good. Well, thank you again for being here. I would like to welcome you to the Congressional Lunch. This is your opportunity to hear from our congressional delegation, who is fighting for us every day in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. is quite a place right now. First off, I'd like to take a moment to thank you to our gold sponsors once again. If you haven't made a previous event, you need to hear their names, and you need to hear them again because they are great. They are sponsoring at a very high level to make this thing happen. Once again, platinum sponsors, Senator Ron Wyden, IBEW Local 48, AFSCME Council 75, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, International Association of Machinists, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 5, them's my crew, King Estate Winery, yeah, Morel Inc., whoa, NGP Van, Oregon Education Association, Pacific Northwest Regional Council of Carpenters, SEIU Local 49, Senator Mark Hass, candidate for Secretary of State, UFCW Local 555. And once again, check your sponsors out on page 8 of your program. And I'd like to give a big thank you to staff and wait people. They work hard. Yes, they work hard. I'd like to also give a big thank you to our volunteers who are donating their time all weekend and working all day each day. Yeah, volunteers. They have the purple name tags. Once again, reminder, you may see press this weekend with their bright pink name tags. And of course, lastly, our special thank you to our DPO staff who are magnificent, wonderful, and who are ensuring this weekend runs smoothly. Yay, DPO! And they are of yellow name tags. So look for colors, ask questions, it's all good. Okay, first up to bat, I would like to introduce a video greeting from Congressman from Congressional District 3 back in the northwest side, Multnomah and Clackamas, Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
Sorry I'm unable to be with you for the summit today. I always look forward to it. But as you know, one of our major priorities is the Green New Deal. And today I'm working with activists, celebrity chefs, people involved with agriculture on what a Green New Deal looks like for agriculture. It's one of our top priorities and something we can follow through on now. I'm also sorry I'm not there to welcome Sharice David, somebody I was honored to campaign for in Kansas last year, to be one of the first Native American women elected to Congress. She is a fabulous addition to the new Congress. You'll also have a chance to hear from my colleagues who will detail some of the work we're doing now on our priorities in Congress, moving legislation that's going to make a difference, providing a foundation for the next Congress, and putting some heat on Moscow Mitch. These are making a difference now. It's going to help us lead to an expanded majority in the House, picking up seats in the Senate, and defeating Donald Trump, so we can take our country back.
Thank you, Earl. Next, I would like to invite our congressional representatives who are here up. Congressman Peter DeFazio, CD4. Congressman Kurt Schrader, CD5. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, CD1. Okay, we have a little special presentation that's not on your agenda. It's a special day today. It's Congressman Schrader's birthday. He told me he's 29. Presenting a cake with a significant single candle. It's all a mystery. It's Tanya Shiley.
We should get...
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Congressman Schrader. Happy birthday to you. Woo! And now you're in the awkward position of not knowing what to do with a piece of cake. But that's on you.
balancing it.
All right, that's great. Okay, folks, it's my honor to introduce the moderator for our lunch program. Chrissy Erguiza is the best kind of overachiever. She works tirelessly to help others, to organize progressives, and to win Democratic races. At the Democratic Party of Oregon, I am really grateful for Chrissy's leadership as chair of both the Asian American Pacific Islander Caucus and the DPO Local Events and State Fair Committee, where Chrissy and her team of volunteers did an incredible job this last August and into September, organizing the state fair with 150 volunteer work shifts over the 10-day duration. This is no small task. But the best thing about it is Chrissy loves her work and she does it with such enthusiasm that it is infectious and inspiring. So thank you, Chrissy. So please join me in welcoming Chrissy Erguiza to the stage to lead this discussion with our congressional delegation. All right, Chrissy.
It's so good to be with you all. Good morning, and as we say in Tagalog, mabuhay and magandang umaga. Good morning. I am happy to be with you again, and I'm also happy that they provided me a chair this time, so I get to not stand for an hour. So thank you. So I'm just going to jump into it and ask our congressional delegation here today a few important questions, and I'd like to ask each of our representatives to spend a couple minutes telling us what they are working on right now. Congressman DeFazio, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, thanks. Well, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee is writing the first 21st century transportation bill, a bill that's going to move us to electrification, defossilization of transportation. It's going to build out new infrastructure with new materials that are less carbon intensive and will last longer. We're going to build in resilience. We're doing this in most of my subcommittees that have any jurisdiction. Wastewater, we're going to require recapturing of methane and generating electricity if they use federal money. We're looking at with Charisse, well, Charisse over there is sitting next to her. Charisse and I are looking at aviation and how we can reduce fossil fuel in aviation. We're going to enhance rail because it's a much more efficient mode of transport for people and freight and all that. But I'm just going to say, this was one hell of a week in D.C. And we are in the middle of a constitutional crisis. And we should, in my opinion, given the fact that Mick Mulvaney just gave us the smoking gun, we should move ahead immediately with impeaching the President of the United States. That doesn't mean we won't continue all the other investigations, including mine into the Trump Hotel. We can have more than one articles of impeachment. But let's start with that one, which is definitive, where he sold out our national security, self-dealing. It borders on, some might say, treason. And that's just extraordinary. And it is finally giving some pause to some of the Republicans. Not enough, but we will impeach him. There are a few cracks in the Senate, but tell you what, I think that the way we're going to get rid of this guy is you. All of you and all of the active Democrats across the United States of America. We've got to beat this guy at the ballot box. In the last election, in my district, Hillary only won by 554 votes. That was because of her support of TPP, her ties to Wall Street, which has just destroyed Boeing, a great company, by pressuring them into putting a plane out too quickly that wasn't ready to fly. We've got to fight back. That's the essence of Democrats. That's why I co-founded the Progressive Caucus in Congress, and we have to be progressive. Can't be a milquetoast alternative to Donald Trump. We got to be 180 degrees away from Donald Trump for the American people, and we got to let them know we're with them. We lost people in the last election, and in states we never should have lost, in the Midwest, who are now being screwed by the tax cuts, and he's delivered nothing for them. So thank you all for being here. Let's look forward to victory November 2nd in 2020 and take back the country for all Americans.
Congresswoman Bonamici, did you want to add to that, Congressman Schrader?
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah, if you want to say anything.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be back at this summit. I want to say that this year has been my first opportunity to serve in the majority in Congress, and what a difference it makes to be setting the agenda rather than just playing defense, and in large part because of the work that you and Democrats did across the country. We have so many phenomenal new colleagues like Sharice Davids from Kansas, Kendra Horn from Oklahoma. We got 2 women who served in the CIA, Abigail Spanberger from Virginia, Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan, and we have a House Democratic caucus that looks a lot more like the United States of America, which is amazing. So, I mean, I'm going to start with, impeachment, because I just did 6 town hall meetings across Northwest Oregon, and that's what people want to know about. That's what's on people's minds, because as Peter said, we're in a constitutional crisis right now. We have someone who is completely ignoring separation of powers, checks and balances, defiant. And I tell you what put me over the line, and I've spoken up and out against many of the president's policies and behaviors, but the Mueller report did it for me, and the fact that he's completely defying subpoenas and our constitutional obligation to provide those checks and balances. So this week was a whirlwind of activity. None of us, as far as I know, is on the 3 committees that are doing the investigation. The Oversight Committee, and can we just say how devastated we are to lose Congressman Elijah Cummings, who was a true champion for the people, for civil rights, and a man of great character. What a loss for Congress, for Maryland, for Congress, and for the country. However, his work carries on to Oversight Committee, Intelligence Committee, led by the amazing Congressman Adam Schiff, and then, of course, a Foreign Affairs Committee, getting everything ready to send to the Judiciary Committee to get his impeachment going. And I think really this week saw so many examples of where there are going to be articles of impeachment. So we absolutely need to get that done and take that fight to the Senate. And as Peter said, we're starting to see cracks. We just found out this morning that one of our Republican colleagues from Florida, Congressman Francis Rooney, who started criticizing the president, announced this morning he's not running for re-election. He said he needs to answer to his children more than to his constituents. And I think we're seeing a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, especially after this devastating tragedy, preventable tragedy in Syria, where people are losing their lives because of reckless decisions on the part of this president. So we've got to get this done and send a message that this behavior is completely unacceptable, unconstitutional, and I'm looking forward to that vote, I hope soon. But that's, again, not all we are doing. I'm honored to serve on the Education and Labor Committee. Used to be the Education and Workforce Committee, now it's the Education and Labor Committee, where under the great leadership of Congressman Bobby Scott, we've been passing bills. We just passed out of the committee the bill to lower prescription drug costs, something that everybody's talking about. It's about time we let Medicare negotiate for better prices. So we passed that out of committee. The PRO Act, Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the Equality Act, there's so much that we're doing. And I'm honored to chair the Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Human Services, where we're really focused on equality in education and human services, and standing up for people who are either those historically disadvantaged, bringing that equity lens. We are also working on a really important topic, student debt and affordable higher education, making sure that everyone has a path. If it's higher education, there is no reason in the world why anyone should say, I can't go to college because I can't afford it. And for those who don't choose college, apprenticeships, workforce training, through our Friends in Labor or other registered apprenticeship programs, that's really critical. And on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, I'm happy to report that we're no longer debating whether climate change is real. We're debating what to do about it. And it's about time. I'm also the only Pacific Northwest member on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. So we are making progress and sending so many good bills to the Senate, where we'll continue to take the fight, because the Senate needs to be doing more than confirming right-wing judges. They need to pass the policies that we've sent over, the more than 100 good bills. So we keep working for the people and passing our progressive agenda, affordable higher education, addressing climate change, all of these things that the people are fairness in elections, our great HR 1 bill that we sent over, so that the rest of the country can look more like Oregon. So we're keeping up the fight. And one more thing I wanted to mention too is that we are working hard to make sure that women can make their own reproductive health care decisions on an equitable basis. We know that that wealthy women have access even when there are restrictions, but this is an issue of equity. I don't want any more men telling me what women can do with their bodies. So I'm going to pass it over to Kurt, but look forward to the continued conversation. Thanks, Chrissy.
Yeah, you touched on some of the subjects. Congressman Schrader?
Well, I think they covered quite a little bit. I guess I just echo that, contrary to what the president says, this Congress, the Democratic House, has been extremely active. The H.R. 1, election security, voters going against, pushing back against the voter suppression that's around the country, trying to engage in campaign finance reform, the Equity Act, making sure everybody is treated equally in all walks of life, no matter what, equal pay. We actually passed a bill out of my committee dealing with robocalls. We're dealing with net neutrality, passed a bill to the Senate dealing with net neutrality. We've done a lot with prescription drugs. My committee, I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and that's our major purview. We actually shamed the Republicans into supporting, 6 or 8 bills that they would not bring up when they were in control. The way it just would not bring them up. But having Democrats in control, thanks to everybody out here and across this country, we're able to bring up these bills and get them to actually support some actions against some of these egregious pharmaceutical companies that are ripping people off unfairly. We also worked on the negotiating drug prices. I mean, that was a deal that was cut, a long time ago. Pharmaceutical industry's gotten a little different, well, quite a bit different. Things are so much more costly now. Everybody should be able to negotiate a fair price for the medication they need to live. That's just the bottom line. And we've picked up the majority in 2018. That was pretty awesome. That was awesome. That was an amazing feat. Again, thank you, everybody, Charisse and everybody. Just impressive. The seats we won, I would not have imagined. In South Carolina, Oklahoma, Kansas, Utah, upstate New York, upper parts of Michigan. I mean, these are rural areas that are frustrated with this executive who doesn't know how to run a country, doesn't know how to, frankly, run his own office, as we've seen time and again. I'll just add that I think there are, to what my colleagues are saying, there are cracks in the Republican wall or facade out there. I will remind everybody that last year and earlier this year and just recently, we've had a number of votes that have been bicameral and bipartisan to refute the President of the United States. Remember, he tried to do that border wall at the end of last year, beginning into this year. There was bipartisan, bicameral resolution of disapproval of his reasserting, rearranging the funds that Congress appropriates, not the president. He tried to rearrange those funds. He's sacrificing schools on military bases and all sorts of things to get money for his wall. The Mueller report to be made public, that was voted out of the House of Representatives 420-0. 420-0 to make sure everyone knew what the heck was in that, had the opportunity to review it. And then, most recently here, abandoning our allies in the Middle East. Folks that are struggling for their own existence, trying to keep, themselves, healthy and fight for their country as they see it. And here we abandon them. Nice to see Lindsey Graham twist in the wind a little bit as he tries to figure out how he's going to reassert his foreign policy with a president that doesn't know what foreign policy is all about. So we're seeing resolutions of disapproval in many different areas. The tsunami is building, I think, against the president. have the G7 summit in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, come on. I mean, it's at some point in time. At some point in time. So I think we're close, very close. The investigations are good. I think we're building a case for the American people. The inclination to move for impeachment has gone way up. Way up, just over the last month and a half. And I think we're building that case very, very effectively. I give Nancy Pelosi a lot of credit out there. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Congressman. And why don't we start with you, and we'll go down this way as well. And I know all of you have touched on impeachment, and so we've one of the top questions that we received from our attendees was about impeachment. And how specifically are you using your individual and collective power in a co-equal branch of government to hold the executive branch accountable for the president's brazen behavior, stonewalling, and his blatant disregard for your legal oversight?
Well, and we're trying to create that visibility that Suzanne and Peter talked about. We've got 3 committees investigating the various nefarious activities that this president has done with reckless abandon to build the case to the American people that he deserves to be impeached. It's a slow process, too slow for many of us. I get that. Adam Schiff, I think, is doing an amazing job as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. He's calm, he's cool under pressure. Big contrast to the Republican ranking member and the rest of the members there. Doing very good due diligence, subpoenaing the witnesses. I think some of the testimony we've seen in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee recently and from the State Department. It's nice to have Sondland at least show up, despite the fact that Trump tells him not to. Volker showing up. We're building the case. It's not just one person, some rogue person the president tries to mischaracterize. There are a lot of folks, career people who care about this country that are alarmed, just alarmed and terrified at what he is doing to our country and our democracy. So slowly but surely, I think we're getting, again, to a really good spot. The evidence is becoming overwhelming. And I think everybody, even a lot of my colleagues are in ruby red districts, we took some very ruby red districts, are able now to talk about this in a way that helps spread that, oh gosh, this may be indeed a bridge too far. This president's gone down. Build that case so we can do what we need to do.
Thanks, Kurt. And I just want to add a couple of things. I think helping the public understand. People are saying, oh, well, you're doing this behind closed doors. That's because there's no special investigator like, remember Ken Starr, right? There isn't a special investigation going on. So what they're doing in the hearings right now is making sure that the witnesses aren't listening to each other and collaborating so they're all telling the same story. Then we will bring this public and do it out. We will be doing it out in the open, but they have to get all the facts in a way that preserves the integrity of the investigation, because those committees are essentially doing what the special investigators had done in other impeachment cases. And another thing, too, is really, I think it was really moving to see several colleagues who have backgrounds with our intelligence agencies or in the military come out after they heard about this call between the president and Ukraine and say, this is unacceptable, and yes, we're in districts that Trump won overwhelmingly, but we are doing our constitutional duty, and we took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And when the founders drafted the Constitution, they put in those checks and balances, and it is our responsibility. And there are checks and balances. The president gets to veto legislation. That's a check. We get to impeach, and without that impeachment clause, that was part of the whole consideration of making sure that we have these separate and independent branches of government. And I actually did a little research and went back and read what some of the founding fathers said when they put the impeachment clause in the Constitution. And when you read what they envisioned, the president might use the power to his own advantage. The president might have power that is unchecked and unacceptable. The president might use the power instead of being for the country, but to try to get himself reelected. I mean, those are things that were contemplated at the time that the impeachment clause was put in the Constitution. It is exactly what our responsibility is. So seeing people even in ruby red districts say, this is not about politics. This is about upholding our constitutional responsibility. So speaking out on that and making sure that people understand how the process is working and why it is currently a closed process but will be open is really, really important. And then, of course, we have to take the fight to the Senate. That's where the trial, don't listen to these people, oh, we don't have any due process. That's what happens in the Senate. The Senate does the trial phase. So we are seeing, as Kurt was saying, a lot of the Republicans, we're starting to see cracks and see them speaking up as we look across the country. Now a majority of people support impeaching the president. So it's really critical, but we are in sort of uncharted territory. What do we do when the administration just defies subpoenas? Right. Energy Secretary Perry, don't get me started on the cabinet, but I do want to digress for just a brief moment and say that my favorite sign at the Women's March was, I have seen better cabinets at IKEA. Because I love that sign. But Perry said, I'm not going to comply with his subpoena, so what do? Well, we can go to the courts, but then it takes time. Or do we just add it as another article of impeachment in defiance? So it's sort of constitutional crisis is sort of uncharted territory, but we're working through it, we're standing up, we're speaking out, and we're fighting.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Well, my committee has jurisdiction over the Government Services Administration, Public Buildings and Grounds. I started asking questions in November 16 of GSA. The lease says no elected official of the United States of America shall benefit from this lease. I'm asking them, okay, what are you going to do about the lease? Well, what they've done about the lease is nothing. They have a secret legal opinion that says that either he's not an elected official, I guess, or somehow that doesn't apply to him. And then this is the old post office building, the Trump Hotel. There's also, I think, a scandal around the FBI headquarters. My committee's investigating both of these things. I went on a lawsuit in June of 17 on emoluments against the president with other members of Congress. We finally got a judge to rule a couple of weeks ago that we have standing. I mean, that's how slow the court process is. That's why we're going to have to impeach him, because we aren't going to win this in the courts. They can slow walk us forever. But if anything is an absolutely clear violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution, it's hosting the G7 at his hotel. That is absolutely definitive. He is going to benefit from those payments. So, I'm going to continue to press this. On my committee, we've finally given up. We haven't been able to get the documents we need, the financials, the legal opinion. We're going to issue a subpoena, but then they're going to slow walk the subpoena and they'll fight us in court. But we're going to keep pushing on it.
Can we get the money back?
Oh, well, I like what Nancy said at one point was, maybe after the Mueller report came out, he can't be prosecuted as president, but he can go to jail after.
Thank you all for your responses and for keeping us informed about the process. I remember 2 years ago I asked that question about what were we going to do impeachment, and I remember that, if we're going to wait for the Mueller report, we'll see what happens, and so much has changed from the last summit, so here we are putting the pressure on. I'm going to change topics to something that is very relevant to me and very relevant to my generation and a lot of young people in this room, and this is about student debt. As you know, student debt makes up over $1.5 trillion in debt for Americans and is preventing many Oregon families from pursuing the American dream. For me, I'm contemplating if I want to have kids or not, if I could afford a house, if I want to get a higher degree. So this is really personal for a lot of younger Americans that really struggle to see what vision they have growing up. So what is being done in Congress to address the student debt crisis, and how do you feel about the plans for student debt forgiveness?
Still working? Hello, yeah, it's working again. I introduced a bill in the last Congress. Clearly, the Republicans ignored it to make higher education affordable or post-secondary. It isn't all just higher. We want to encourage others to stay in high school and get vocational skills, go into the trades and anything else. So any kind of assistance after high school. My bill goes to a number of key issues. It moves the Pell Grant from $6,000 up to the average cost of public tuition, $12,000 a year. It reinforces the public service loan forgiveness program, that you can go into a public service job in an area that needs teachers or some other skill, nurse, whatever, and you get 10% of your debt forgiven every year. I changed the standards on when you have to start repaying your debt. Right now, you have to start repaying your debt when you earn $17,000 a year when you come out of college. Now, with the average OSU student graduating with $39,000 of debt, what do you think that means in terms of how much of their discretionary income is getting eaten up? I more than double that. There are a number of other very crucial provisions. If you made regular payments for 20 years and you chose to work in a low-income job, your loans are gone. These are things that we need to do, and a number of these things in Suzanne's committee are being incorporated into the higher education reauthorization, which is going to move in the very near future out of the House. This is a crisis. I benefited from federal loans, and I just went back and used the calculator to see. I graduated with like $12,000 of debt, but it was a hell of a long time ago. And it came up to just about the same amount as someone graduating from OSU now, about $39,000. And I remember when I was working as a bike mechanic, and I had a couple of bank loans, and I had some federal loans, and they wanted me to repay an absurd amount of money every month. And I'm like, that's more than I earn. And so I went in my coveralls to the bank, kind of greasy looking, and I had hair then, and it was long. And I came in, and they said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to talk to the president of the bank." And they're like, "What?" And I said, "No, but that's not possible." They said, "Well, I'm just going to sit over there until the president of the bank sees me." And so they didn't want someone like me sitting in the front room there. It didn't look too good. So after a while, I sent out some manager, and the manager says, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want to be able to afford to repay my loans, and what you're asking for is absurd. I'm not going to have any money to eat." And anyway, I got a little bit of a negotiation with him, and I got the term extended. But we've got to do that automatically. We need to reduce the debt burden. We need to make it easier to repay and get it forgiven. We have to give everybody a low interest rate. I mean, they should get the same interest rate as the banks get from the Federal Reserve. What the hell is that about?
Thanks, Peter. This is an issue I care about greatly, especially as a member of the Education and Labor Committee, but also as someone who I worked my way through first 2 years at Lane Community College and 2 years at U of O and then 3 years at law school. So I had 7 years, grants, loans, work study, and I didn't go to a law firm. I went to do consumer protection at the Federal Trade Commission, which was, I made less than I would have at a law firm, but it still was a very manageable amount of debt. That is not the story I'm hearing from people today. We need short-term solutions and we need long-term solutions. In the short term, the people with existing debt, we absolutely need to let them refinance. I have a provision in the College Promise Act, which we just reintroduced this week, the Comprehensive Higher Education Act. I have a provision to get and keep more people in income-driven repayment, so they don't have to sit in a lobby of a bank. If they have low income, they pay based on income, and then we automatically verify that every year by having the Treasury Department report the income, so people aren't thrust into default. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a disaster. So it was passed in 2007 in Congress with bipartisan support for people who are going into public service to encourage them, incentivize them. And the deal is, you get into public service and you work 10 years, you pay based on income for 10 years, and then after 10 years, the balance is forgiven. So 10 years went past, 2017. Now we've got DeVos, don't get me started, running the Department of Education. And the people who are applying, they're approving 1% of the people who are applying for forgiveness at the end of 10 years. So in 2018, Congress passed a bill saying, fix this, simplify it, make it work, because this is a promise. It's not an empty promise. It's a promise, and people made career and education decisions based on it. Right. So now, guess how many people are having their balances forgiven? 1%. So it's a mess. Of course, the Department of Education has outsourced this to a company up in Pennsylvania that refused to show up for the hearing. I had a conversation with people who are in this program, and the information they're getting from the Education Department, it's outrageous. They'll say to one person, sorry, you don't qualify because you didn't consolidate your loan. So they're going to consolidate their loans, and they'll call back and say, sorry, you don't qualify because you consolidated your loans. I mean, it's that bad. So fixing that is part of this comprehensive bill that we have, but it's absolutely outrageous that people who relied on this and are serving in public service are not getting their balances forgiven. So we're going to fix that. The Pell Grants, work study, I'm reforming work study. It's an underused program. We want to make sure that the dollars are going to the students who need it, and importantly, that their work study jobs are aligned with their career goals and interests, which will help them when they get to the workforce. So all of these pieces are in that. In the long term, we absolutely need to make sure that education is debt-free. We absolutely need to do that, and we can. It's not that we don't have the resources, it's a matter of priorities. And I would rather spend your tax dollars educating people, which we know is a good investment, than spending them on weapons that we don't need. So it's a priority, it's something that we need, it's good for our communities, it's good for our economy, and we shouldn't have people, like Chrissy said, giving up making life decisions because they're straddled with this debt. So it's a priority, and we're going to get it over the finish line in the House and then take the fight to the Senate. Kurt.
Thank you.
Just echo what all my colleagues are saying here. Probably the greatest travesty since I've been in public service is the legacy we're leaving our children. The debt that they are incurring just to get an education, it's pretty unconscionable. Elections matter. I remember under the Obama administration consistently increasing Pell Grants. The prior higher ed reauthorization, big boosts in Pell Grants, trying to make sure college was affordable for everybody. We got the loan forgiveness program beefed up at that point in time. We had a Secretary of Education that actually cared about kids and education, understood what it was all about. It is difficult. It is difficult. This new Higher Ed Act that Suzanne's committee has introduced incorporates a lot of great things that we've been talking about for years. I've got a loan forgiveness provision in there that I co-sponsor with Senator Warren and Representative Courtney to make sure that we can actually let these young folks, and sometimes not so young folks, frankly. There's a lot of folks about my generation facing some of the same problems after 40 years. It's not just young people, frankly, people trying to retrain. But being able to refinance those loans at competitive rates like Peter talked about. We allowed to do that for a mortgage, for your car, for any other sort of loan you take out. Why the heck not for probably the biggest investment a lot of us are going to make in our lives, and that's our education opportunity out there. So I'm really pleased about what's the bill. It goes after the forgiveness problems we're having with DeVos and the Secretary of Education, setting the record straight. There's actually bipartisan support, I think, for that. We've got a long road to go, but I'm very confident that this is going to be one of the signature achievements of this particular Congress, is repassing the higher ed authorization for our kids.
I want to add, were you done, Kurt? I just want to add one thing, too, that's really important, is making sure that financial aid is available to Dreamers and students who are undocumented, because we absolutely need to do that. Our Dreamers, I mean, they could find a cure for cancer, right? The next great American novel. I mean, there's so much potential in there, and to have a barrier because of an undocumented status is absolutely unacceptable. Yes, we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform, but with regard to higher education, we should not withhold student aid from undocumented students.
Thank you all for your answers. I just wanted to point out Congressman DeFazio's socks. These are pretty rad. Those are pretty rad. I've been staring at them this whole entire time. Sorry. Non sequitur, I know.
A lot of thematic socks, but the ones I wore for the hearing with Uber and Lyft and what they're doing by allowing sexual predators to drive and by, screwing people by saying they are contractors and not employees. I have some that have a middle finger, so I wore those that day.
We learn something new every day. Well, I'm going to go ahead and switch gears. I just wanted to shout out on the socks. So we will now go to questions from the audience, of course, starting with a question from our own DPO chair, Casey Hansen. What's your question, Casey?
All right. Thank you very much. The Trump administration and Republicans are on the attack against unions and odd night. We got the question. I could just use my own power. All right, there we go. The Trump administration and the Republicans are on the attack against unions and against collective bargaining. What are you doing? What are your plans in Congress to correct that situation, to address it, and to move forward?
Whose turn?
I'll go.
They're all
well,
so
we
passionate
just
about this, so.
whatever.
Congressman Schrader. Yeah.
I'm on the left anyway, like usual. We actually just recently passed a bill talking about expanding collective bargaining rights to our first responders. Trying to make sure that this administration knows and others that, everyone should have the right to bargain for working hours, conditions, workplace, the whole 9 yards. And we're sending a message back to this administration that what they're doing through the Janus decision, appointing these judges, horrible situation, that we're not going to stand for that at the end of the day. We've pushed really hard on making sure that in all the appropriation bills, there can't be these little caveats that undermine workers' opportunities for project labor agreements, none of this right-to-work stuff that's prevalent throughout the South, pay people less basically for good jobs. We're keeping our eye on what on the surface could be a good program, making sure apprenticeship programs roll out, much like we have in our trades and what have you. But there's an ugly potential undertone there that they're going to try and undermine the quality of the apprenticeship programs we already currently enjoy. So this whole IRAP rollout by this administration, we're taking a very critical eye out on to make sure that they don't undermine all the great work that's already out there. And we've been pushing a lot of career and technical education programs, just trying to make sure. It's been a big thing for me when I was in the state legislature. This is something we were very interested in. Oregon now is a leader, thanks to all of you out there and our elected state officials, a leader in making sure that these programs exist so these young people can transition maybe into a debt-free family wage job by getting involved with our union men and women, making sure that they're part of that solution and provide for their families going forward. So we're setting the mark in a very different way. But again, elections matter. Our goal, folks, here should be focused on that presidency. Senate's really important, but it still takes 60 votes to get anything through the Senate. But that presidency is so critical. Our sole focus in this next election shouldn't be, making on us, so to speak. Let's make sure it's on the President of the United States, win that office back, because unfortunately they're doing so much damage there at that administration executive level.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was going to address that. Thank you for the question, Casey. We know that this administration is attacking the rights of workers and the rights to organize. I've seen it over the years in the Education and Labor Committee, and I was so proud to support the PRO Act, Protecting the Right to Organize Act, that moved out of the committee, a sort of comprehensive bill to protect those rights, because we know what the labor movement has done to build the middle class. We know what happens when workers have that right and they can organize. So I'm looking forward to seeing that bill come to the floor and again taking that fight to the Senate, because we're not going to stand for these attacks. As we see income inequality increasing, we absolutely need to bring back in full force all of these rights that give workers a fair shot. And so we're going to be working on getting that bill through the House. I hope very soon, a comprehensive bill to protect all the rights to organize and stop these right to work for less states across the country. So thanks for the question. It's a really important one. As we've seen, wages have been stagnant, and when people are able to organize, it helps wages, it helps working conditions, things like paid leave and health insurance, all these things that come from being part of a labor union help give people that quality of life. So we're going to fight. Thanks.
I'm proud co-sponsor of the PRO Act. It's moved out of committee. Hopefully we'll move it through the House soon. But on my committee, we've got a couple of major issues. One is the Republican FAST Act, the last major reauthorization, allowed what was called fund swapping. So states, some states, like Iowa, who had an all-Republican legislature, are taking and swapping federal funds, and then they can avoid Davis-Bacon and Made in America, Buy America provisions. with Abby Finkenauer, another fabulous new member who came in with Charisse, just was in her district in Cedar Rapids a couple of weeks ago to help her get reelected. She and I are we're gonna take that out of the law. They cannot do fund swapping to get around prevailing wage, and they can't do it to get around Buy America. And then this week, when I wore my emoji socks, I was going to have Uber and Lyft in. At the last minute, they strung us along. They said they'd come. Last minute, they said they wouldn't come. And I said, well, you're going to be really sorry if you don't come. And they're saying, oh, well, you don't have jurisdiction. I said, yeah, I got jurisdiction. I said, you know, you want to partner with federally funded transit agencies? Guess what? I can impose conditions on you. You want to get contracts with GSA? Guess what? I can impose, restrictions on you. They are, their background checks are phony. And in Eugene, my little Eugene, these people passed a background check with Uber and Lyft. They were just great. They're out there driving around. But unfortunately for Uber, Eugene requires they be fingerprinted. They're fingerprinted. 13 came up as serious felons, 1 murderer, 1 predator, sexual predator, and 11 others. And this is going on all around America. There has been an epidemic of women being abused. And by the way, when you take the app, you give up all your rights to sue Uber or Lyft. So, I was highlighting that. They knew I was going to do that. That's why they didn't want to come. And the other thing they're doing is saying all these people are contractors. One of the things in the PRO Act is we're going to redefine what's a contractor. These people aren't contractors. And California passed a law. Uber and Lyft are going to spend $100 million to attempt to rescind that law by initiative. Wow. To say that these people are all, they're not employees. So, these are a couple of things I'm working on in addition to the PRO Act. And then the other one thing, USMCA, the renegotiation. I voted against NAFTA, opposed it vigorously at the time. And, the president came up with these phony labor and environmental side agreements at the last moment that allowed some Democrats to switch their vote and say, oh, yeah, I can vote for it. I said, no, those are phony, non-binding side agreements. And, that's essentially what's going on here. When we had our next to the last meeting with Trump on infrastructure, he said, well, USMCA, it's all fixed. And we were like, what, Mr. President? Yeah, well, labor supports it. Dick Durbin there. He says, what, Mr. President? We haven't heard that. And Trump says, oh, yeah, Mexico passed a law. They passed a law that fixed it. And I said, Mr. President, look, I was here when Clinton had phony, non-binding labor and side agreements. Mexico passing a law which we can't enforce is the same thing. And until they fix that and until they fix the environment, I'm not voting for it.
Great. I'm wondering what other emoji socks you have that are issues oriented.
The White House socks, those were...
Okay.
I have a pair for that.
Okay, take it.
If you have to really look, it says this meeting is totally bullshit.
All right, so I am looking for audience questions now. All right, we have, I believe, Grayson Dempsey of NARAL. I wonder what her question could entail.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank Congressman Bonamici specifically for calling out reproductive freedom, since we know that this is such a hot topic in our political world. And I know all of you are aware that across the country we are seeing state-level bans that are intending to overturn and gut Roe versus Wade, punish women, and criminalize abortion. And I think we hear a lot in these discussions about the state-level policies, about the Supreme Court, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you can do in Congress to help make sure that we protect the right to equitable and accessible abortion care.
Grayson, thank you. I'm going to say, first of all, I got to take this one because as the only woman in the delegation.
Thank you.
Grayson and NARAL, Planned Parenthood, can we just give a big round of applause for the work that they do? And thank you. Yay. So we need the rest of the country to be like Oregon, right? Where we let women make their own decisions. Roe versus Wade was based on privacy. We don't need other people telling us what to do, how to make reproductive decisions, when and if to bear a child. That's not their business. They don't belong in those decisions. So we're not going back. That's what I'm saying. Women, we're not going back, because some of us remember the days before Roe versus Wade. And we're not going back to back alleys and self-help and the inequities that existed when wealthy women could get on a plane and go somewhere and arrange an abortion, and low-income or struggling women could not. It's not right, it's not fair, and it's not going to happen again. Not on our watch. We're not going to let that happen. So in Congress, we're working on things like getting rid of the Hyde Amendment, which is really an equity issue as well. And the whole Title X issue, it's absurd that Planned Parenthood they should get all the money they need to help prevent unintended pregnancies. I mean, good grief, it makes absolutely no sense that these essential healthcare services are now going to be denied because the Trump administration and these guys don't think that women can make their own decisions. So we are fighting, and sadly, I'm sad to report that about 25% of the judges now on the bench are Trump appointees and nominees and confirmed. So we're going to have to keep fighting in the legislative branch, but also continue, thanks to our great work of our Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, keep fighting for those rights of women. And I think even though we have male allies, having more women at the table does make a difference. And you know, what's that? Pro-choice women. Yes. Yes, Representative David. More pro-choice women at the table. It does make a difference. So having more pro-choice women and allies makes a difference, and that's why we're going to have to work really, really hard in 2020, because it's going to take a long time to get relief through the courts. I'm not going to make any predictions about what's going to happen at the Supreme Court, but we know there's an extreme amount of concern about that. So the work at the state level really makes a difference, but we're going to keep up the fight, because we are not going back. Thank you for your work, NARAL, Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, I want to thank NARAL. I'm proud to have their support, and they've been there since my first election. They sent a couple of people out from Washington in my first election, and we sent them up to Sweet Home to canvass, and that was an eye-opening experience for that, let me tell you. But, you know, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen when it gets to the Supreme Court. But remember, yeah, it's a constitutional right. I believe that. But if they say it isn't a constitutional right, we can legislate that as a right in the House and the Senate if we have the right president and we have the Senate.
Well, I'll just add that we're fighting these fights right now in the appropriations process. The major reason we don't have a complete budget bill at this point in time is because of all the stuff the Republicans are trying to put into an appropriations bill to make the Hyde Act permanent, to get rid of Title X, to undermine women's reproductive rights, all the things that we care about. The good news is, you know, your delegation's obviously united. We have great leaders. Grayson and what NARAL does here in Oregon helps us help you guys out there in the real world. And you're a shining light, really a shining light to a lot of these folks in different parts of the country. The reason Cherise spoke out is because not everyone in Kansas is pro-choice. And there's a lot of folks in other parts of the country that aren't that way either. They're under the thumb of these men that speak for them, which is really, really terrible. So good news is you've got a great delegation, I think, really working hard. Frankly, Nancy and Steny and Jim Clyburn all doing yeoman's work and appropriations with Nita and the rest of the crew. So we're fighting those battles right now. Thank you for making us strong.
I just want to add one thing, too. I would think it's so ironic that these arguments typically come from people who argue for less government, right? Oh, we need smaller government.
Right.
Well, then get your government out of your government out of women's bodies. That's a place to start.
Heck yes, Congresswoman. And I just want to say how fortunate we are to the work of NARAL and Planned Parenthood that our state of Oregon is like the beacon of light when it comes to reproductive health here, and I hope other states can follow to suit as well. So shout out to that. I'm going to share another question that was submitted online, which was, this reads, over the last 40 years, the executive branch has usurped, I don't know, pronounce that, usurped Congress's constitutional role to declare war. Will you fight to restore this constitutional right to Congress, regardless of the administration?
Well, since my first term in Congress, I actually worked with Larry Tribe at Harvard, and he's a great constitutional lawyer on this issue, and I introduced a bill then. I reintroduced it in this Congress. It is to restore the lawful balance of powers. After Nixon went into Cambodia, Congress passed the War Powers Act. There were two versions. One was prior approval. The other was, oh, you can start the war, but then you got to come for approval within 60 days. Well, unfortunately, that version passed. This was before I was in Congress. So what happens is the president starts the war or conflict. Everybody's juices start flowing. You know, the troops are there. You can take the money away from the troops. You can take the weapons away from the troops. That's Congress's only option at that point in time. And that's not right. So my bill would fix that, require prior authorization, as is in the Constitution of the United States of America, before the president puts our men and women in uniform in harm's way and engages in foreign adventures.
Absolutely.
After years and years of trying, and an interesting alliance between folks like us that frankly think it's Congress's duty to decide when and where and if we get involved in foreign engagements and wars overseas, trying to get rid of the 2001 authorization for use of military force, and if you want, reestablish it with a very narrow resolution dealing with a specific conflict where there is a beginning and an end that we can actually discern. But for first time since I've been in the United States Congress, the House of Representatives voted to redo the 2001 AUMF and make sure that Congress reasserts its authority, just like Peter talked about. First time.
I just want to say I agree with my colleagues and thank Peter for his longstanding work on this. The fact that the president is the commander-in-chief does not give him the authority to start a war. That authority belongs to Congress for good reason, because we represent the people across the country. So we absolutely need to continue that and strengthening as Peter said, the War Powers Act that was passed years ago needs to be stronger to reinforce our
Kurt used initials. They probably, what he said, AUMF, Authorization Use Military Force, which was passed by Congress after 9/11. President Obama and this president have relied upon that to say they don't have to come to Congress again. And in the defense authorization, I have very rarely ever voted for a defense authorization. It's way too much money. But we had some great things in that bill put in by Democrats. If it doesn't come back with those things, I sure won't be voting for it. But one of them was to repeal that, and also to say that the president could not invade Iran without coming to Congress first, and also that we should no longer aid the Saudis in Yemen. There were a host of good things, democratic policies in that bill that reflect our values. And they're in negotiation with the Senate. We'll see what happens.
Thank you. So the time is, I believe, 12:30, and I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Let's see. Over? Sure. Travis Nelson. Sure. All right. We're going to wait for the mic so everyone can hear. Yeah. I can hear you fine.
It's rare that somebody says they can't hear me. So, yeah, I'm African American, LGBTQIA+. People like me are under attack. We've got a president who calls people who look like me sons of bitches, says people who look like me are from shithole countries. What are you doing to ensure that our country is a safe place for people of color and for LGBTQIA persons? Thank you.
Well, thank you. And as the chair of the Civil Rights and Human Services Subcommittee, I was thrilled to be able to pass the Equality Act in the House, which is basically law that we already have passed in Oregon, an anti-discrimination bill. But looking at what this administration has done to disparage people of color, LGBTQ folks, is completely outrageous and unacceptable. We've seen bullying increase in schools. We've seen hate crimes increase. It's unacceptable. So standing up, speaking out, joining with community, when we see all of us, it's incumbent on all of us, when we see those actions in our community to stand up and speak out for those who are being attacked. It's not what the United States is about. It's not what we stand for. We stand for equal rights. We stand for anti-discrimination. We're a country built by immigrants, and it's so antithetical to what we are as a country. So fighting for the next election to make sure that we send a strong message that in the United States of America, this land is for everyone, and everyone deserves to be free from discrimination, no matter who you are, what color, who you love, where you came from. So we're working very hard on the legislation, but also just building community. So we send a strong message that's unacceptable. I grilled Secretary DeVos on that issue because the Education Department repealed the Obama-era guidance on transgender students in schools, and I asked her directly, did you know when you repealed that guidance that the data shows that trans kids in schools are less likely to be successful if they don't have support, more likely to face discrimination, to be suicidal, to lack access to health care? And she said, oh yeah, I knew that. And the Department of Education still repealed that guide. It's completely unacceptable to send that message. And do we have time for a really quick story? Well,
Yeah.
I'll take that as a yes. When we had the hearing, I'll take that as a yes. When we had the hearing on the Equality Act, we had a woman come from rural Texas. She described herself as a Fox News watching evangelical. And she told her story. She said, I had a child who came to me and said, I'm a girl, Mom, I'm a girl. And in her community and in her school, that was unacceptable. Her family talked her into trying conversion therapy. And she said at one point she heard her then 5-year-old child praying to be taken away to Jesus. And she said, when I realized that my child was suicidal, I knew I had to change. So she went to the school district and said, you need to treat my child as a girl. She's a girl. And they said, no, we don't. So she moved her family from rural Texas to Austin. She came and testified and said, this is what we need to do. We need to send a message that all these kids are welcome in school. When her daughter got to school in Austin, they said, your daughter's doing so well. She has so much academic potential, and they weren't talking about where she was going to go to the bathroom. So it was such a compelling story from somebody from rural Texas, and we see people's families standing up and saying, this is real for our families. Every child deserves the opportunity to succeed in schools and to have that support. We were all in tears, but the Equality Act passed out of the House, so thank you.
I mentioned the defense authorization before. One of the other good provisions, there were a lot of them in there, was to prohibit the military from discriminating against trans in that bill. So we're going to have to take positive action to reverse many of the mean-spirited things this guy has done administratively. That takes us right back to where we started. We've got to keep the House, and that means supporting people like Charisse, who are very much at risk. We've got to get the Senate, and we've got to get this guy out of the White House. I don't believe anywhere near a majority of Americans share a fraction of his shown prejudice. And it's just obscene that he's the leader of this country on those issues. Many years ago, we had a pretty good president, but he was wrong too. I voted against the Defense of Marriage Act. I was one of 56 people in the House of Representatives to do that back then. I said it was unconstitutional. Finally, 20 years later, we got a ruling. It was unconstitutional.
I'll just ditto what my colleague said. And unfortunately, the attitude starts at the top. And again, hate to be a broken record, but we got to get a new president. That's our sole big focus going forward, folks. Let's work as a team and make that happen.
Oh, Attorney General is raising her hand. I'm not. I can't.
Since the representative showed
Oh, our socks.
So this scarf is
I didn't notice.
Resistance by Design. That's not necessarily a plug, just for in case you're wondering. This is every woman
You
who
should zoom
ran
up
for
on it.
Congress in 2018.
Oh my gosh.
How awesome is that?
Zoom up. Hold on.
This is on here.
Tim's zooming up. Hold it up. That's beautiful.
What's that? Jamie's on the scarf too. So Jamie's on the scarf. Sharice is on the scarf. I'm on the scarf.
So 2 years from now, we're going to bring an article of clothing with some type of message on it. So I just want to thank all of you for spending time with us here in Sun River, answering our questions and providing inspiration, hope, and encouragement for us to fighting the good fight. And I think we conclude it here. And I just want to thank everybody for asking their questions and people at home, tuning in on the internets. And thank you all very much. And this was a great opportunity to moderate once again with our fellow congressional delegation. So thank you.
Thank you. I love the fashion show. All righty, in Oregon, you also get a fashion show. All right, just a few brief notes. Brief notes while they take pictures over there. And we are reminded we have snowy area that's making the sidewalks a little slick. I want you guys to be very careful as you're treading about. Sun River is working on making it de-iced and de-snowed and cleaned up as best as possible. Please be careful. So thank you again to our Congress folks, Congressman DeFazio, Congressman Schrader, Congresswoman Bonamici for joining us in this valuable conversation. So your next session in a few minutes at 1 p.m., your workshops start in landmark and heritage rooms. If you have trouble finding them, please ask somebody. You should know that if you are going to a session in Landmark 2, that can be accessed by going out the doors near where you registered. A volunteer is there to direct you. Next panels, voting rights. What's next for Oregon's electorate? Organizing in rural and red districts, building the bench in CD2. State of LGBT and youth, injustice, race, bias, and disparity in the criminal justice system. Enjoy, be careful. And tonight we'll see you here in the Homestead building for our keynote dinner with Congresswoman Sharice Davids at 7:15. Bring your lanyards. Thank you, everybody.